It starts with a letter, then an online petition. Next, headlines flash across the local press. England's largest onshore wind farm faces backlash. As the 10,000th signature is added, the clock is ticking on one of the UK's most controversial energy projects. Picture this: 41 wind turbines, each taller than the London Eye, spinning across the ancient moorlands of West Yorkshire, a landscape as much a symbol of Britain's wild beauty as it is a battleground for our renewable future. A storm is brewing over Calderdale. The question, is green energy always green? Or, in our fight against climate change, are we risking the very environments we vow to protect? In the next 20 minutes, we'll unravel a story where money, technology, and nature collide. Investors see profit, politicians see progress, locals see loss, and activists warn of an invisible threat beneath our feet, a carbon time bomb hiding in the bogs. Let's pull back the curtain on the Calderdale Energy Park project and ask, could England's push for renewables actually be setting the stage for an environmental own goal? To understand this storm, we need to understand the ground it's building on. Imagine West Yorkshire's Walshaw Moor, windswept, rugged, carpeted in heather and peat. For centuries, this has been more than just a wild open space. It's a carbon sink, a wildlife sanctuary, and increasingly, a battleground between old ways and new ambitions. The UK, like much of the world, is in a race. The target, net zero by 2050. The tools, solar, nuclear, tidal, and most of all, wind. Onshore wind offers some of the cheapest, fastest-to-build sources of clean power. Each spinning blade is a symbol of hope, a machine eating carbon for breakfast. Or so the story goes. But the transition to renewable energy is never simple. Calderdale Energy Park, the developer behind these plans, claims their project could power 250,000 homes, slashing emissions by hundreds of thousands of tons each year. To supporters, this is a no-brainer. The UK needs more energy security. Local economies get a shot in the arm. The planet gets a reprieve. Yet, every revolution leaves casualties. As the turbines are mapped out across Walshaw Moor, local campaigners begin to organize. Their name, Stronger Together to Stop Calderdale Wind Farm. Their cause, Save the Moorland, before it's too late. Environmentalists raise red flags. Walshaw Moor is not just empty space. It's a globally rare ecosystem, a patchwork of peat bogs, heather plateaus, and hidden wildlife. Peatlands are superheroes in the climate fight. They lock away vast reserves of carbon, quietly pulling CO2 from the air year after year, century after century. Disturb them, experts warn, and it all comes spilling out. Dr. Emily Carter, a peatland ecologist with the Moors for the Future Partnership, puts it bluntly. Disturbance to peat bogs during wind farm construction can release significant amounts of stored carbon, undermining the climate benefits of the project. Restoration efforts are crucial, but their long-term effectiveness remains uncertain. This is the paradox at the heart of Calderdale. Can you build a clean energy future by unearthing a carbon past? Or, as some say, are we simply robbing Peter to pay Paul? Now, the developer faces a gauntlet of scrutiny. After a long and sometimes heated public consultation, thousands of comments flood in. People from Hebden Bridge and beyond voice their support, or their outrage. Calderdale Energy Park compiles mountains of feedback. Opposition groups organize legal advice. Lines are drawn, and the project moves into its next make-or-break phase. What makes this fight different from other wind farm controversies? For starters, the scale. At 41 turbines, it's the largest proposed onshore wind project in England. The developer argues the region's high wind speeds and existing transmission networks make it an ideal site. Investors, watching the UK's stable regulatory environment, eagerly calculate returns. Richard Turner, an infrastructure investment analyst, explains, despite local opposition, projects like Calderdale Energy Park are attracting significant investor interest due to the stable regulatory environment and the growing demand for renewable energy assets. But size is not the only issue. Calderdale Energy Park is classed as a nationally significant infrastructure project. This fast-tracks planning, pushing the final decision out of local hands and into those of the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. Local authorities must lobby, not decide. Councillor Jane Brown sums up the frustration. While the final decision rests with the Secretary of State, Calderdale Council will continue to advocate for the best interests of our local communities and environment. We urge the developers to listen to local concerns and address them in their final proposal. It's a situation primed for conflict. National priorities clash with local rights. Supporters see the moorland as underused or even a source of flood risk, arguing that wind farms bring jobs, investment, and global relevance to a post-industrial region. But opponents see heritage on the line: unique habitats for curlews and merlins, ancient peat bogs storing millennia of carbon, and landscapes woven into the story of Yorkshire itself. Legal hurdles loom. As the official consultation closes, campaigners threaten to launch legal challenges if the environmental impact assessment is found wanting or if community voices are ignored. Mark Thompson, a planning law barrister, notes, "The designation of Calderdale Energy Park as a nationally significant infrastructure project significantly streamlines the planning process, but it also limits the scope for local authorities to object. The focus will be on whether the project meets national policy objectives and whether environmental impacts have been adequately addressed." All the while, another question hangs in the air. Is there a way to have both? Can large-scale renewables and sensitive ecosystems coexist without grave compromises? Renewable energy advocates like Hannah Smith remain cautiously optimistic. Onshore wind has a vital role to play in meeting the UK's climate targets, but projects must be developed in a way that minimizes environmental harm and respects local communities. Early and meaningful engagement is essential. Yet even with the best intentions, the process is fraught. Restoration plans are promised, but the science is not conclusive. Local voices are heard, but the final say lies far away in Whitehall. By late 2025, the stakes are clearer than ever. Calderdale Energy Park prepares its formal application. Investors watch for signals. The community braces for a decision that could send shockwaves across the UK wind industry. Will this be the start of a new era, where massive wind farms roll out across Britain's uplands? Or will Calderdale become ground zero for a new resistance, a place where environmental, economic, and social arguments all hit their limits? Underneath it all, the peat bogs wait, silent and patient, holding their ancient secrets. As one local campaigner puts it, once you dig up the moor, you can't put it back. As the national debate rages, one troubling possibility emerges. Could building giant wind farms on peatlands actually make climate change worse, not better? Or are the risks manageable with careful planning and new technology? With the official public consultation now closed and the next phase about to begin, all eyes turn to the Secretary of State. The outcome could set a precedent not just for Calderdale, but for every corner of the UK where wind, money, and wildness collide. The question is no longer just about turbines. It's about what kind of future Britain wants to build, and what it's willing to risk to get there. In the second half, we'll dive deeper. What are the possible futures for Calderdale? Can new mitigation technologies protect the moor? And will investors and campaigners ever see eye to eye? Or is this the beginning of a much bigger backlash against onshore wind development in Britain's most treasured landscapes? As the Calderdale Energy Park project stands on the brink of a decision, its future hangs in the balance between ambition and caution. The next few months will be critical, not just for the rolling moors outside Hebden Bridge, but for the way Britain charts its path toward renewable energy and environmental stewardship. Let's look ahead to the possible futures that lie before us. The first scenario on the table is conditional approval. If the Secretary of State gives the green light, it will likely be laden with strict requirements: smaller turbines, expanded buffer zones around delicate peatlands, an ironclad program for peatland restoration, and rigorous, ongoing environmental monitoring. The developers would need to prove, over years, that the project's climate gains outweigh its local losses. But even if the project is approved with these strings attached, nothing is guaranteed. Restoration of peatlands is still an emerging science, and the shadow of risk persists. As Dr. Emily Carter warned, mitigation is essential, but it's far from certain that disturbed peat bogs can ever be fully restored. The carbon calculus is perilously close. If a compromise is struck, Calderdale might become a proving ground. Success here could forge a blueprint, showing the world how ambitious renewables can coexist with fragile landscapes. Or, if restoration efforts fall short, it could serve as a warning for future projects dreaming of construction on peat-rich terrain. The second scenario is outright rejection, a stand made not against wind energy, but in defense of irreplaceable ecology. If the Secretary of State decides that the environmental toll, especially to the ancient carbon-storing peatlands, is too steep, it would mark a powerful precedent. Future onshore wind projects in sensitive zones could face much higher hurdles, nudging the UK's energy revolution toward offshore wind farms, solar, and other alternatives. But there's a wider consequence. Rejection could dampen investor enthusiasm for complex, land-based renewables, at least in the UK. As Richard Turner notes, investor interest is strong, but protracted battles and legal risks threaten the predictability that the sector craves. And then there's the legal minefield, the third scenario. Regardless of which way the final decision comes down, someone will likely challenge it. If the project is approved, campaigners, emboldened by their petition and national press, may launch a judicial review, arguing that the environmental impact assessment was lacking or that local voices were ignored. If rejected, developers and investors could mount their own legal challenge, targeting flaws in the planning process or questioning the scientific evidence weighed by decision-makers. Both paths lead to drawn-out battles in the courts, with real consequences. Legal wrangling could stall progress for years, raising costs and sowing uncertainty across the sector. But beyond these institutional dramas, the human stories continue. In Hebden Bridge and beyond, locals are bracing for change, either in the shape of turbine blades on the horizon or in the continuing fight to preserve their home. Jane Harris, a lifelong resident and campaigner, puts it plainly: "We're not against clean energy. We just want the right kind, in the right place, with respect for the land that's protected our communities for generations." Meanwhile, voices on the other side remain persistent. "If not here, where?" challenges renewable advocate Hannah Smith. "Every delay puts our climate goals further out of reach. The UK needs bold action and a willingness to innovate, not just object." So what does all this mean for you, for your family, for communities across Britain facing similar dilemmas? The Calderdale saga is more than a distant battle between legal teams or expert panels. It's a live lesson in how society confronts the climate crisis. First, it demonstrates the essential role of public engagement. Thousands have signed petitions, attended consultations, and spoken up, shaping the debate. For every grand infrastructure project, community voices matter. Your participation, whether for or against, can influence not just the fate of your backyard, but the entire nation's approach to sustainability. Second, this episode exposes the complexity of carbon accounting. It's easy to cheer for renewables and lament the carbon cost of fossil fuels. But the reality is tangled. Wind farms can disrupt carbon sinks like peatlands, and their net climate benefit depends on delicate calculations. As Professor John Barrett explains, it's vital to scrutinize the full life cycle impacts of any energy project. The most sustainable system is nuanced, not simplistic. For activists and local councils, the takeaway is clear: demand transparency. Push for genuinely independent environmental assessments, ones that don't just tally megawatts but account for biodiversity, community well-being, and the legacy of the land itself. For investors and developers, the lesson is about resilience and respect. Projects that bulldoze ahead without persuading local communities or safeguarding nature are on shaky ground. In an era of climate urgency, those who innovate in engagement and restoration, not just in turbines and finance, will lead. On a personal level, the Calderdale debate asks every viewer, how do we navigate trade-offs? Can we accept short-term disruption for long-term gain? Or do some places, ancient moors, hidden habitats, warrant special protection, no matter the broader goal? You might not live near a wind farm or a peat bog, but these questions are coming for all of us. From urban solar arrays to rewilding projects and transport corridors, the choices we make now will echo for decades. And so, the fate of Calderdale Energy Park remains uncertain. The Secretary of State's decision, expected in late 2025, will set the course, but only temporarily. No project exists in a vacuum. Future proposals will learn from whatever unfolds here. Perhaps a new model for balancing green ambition with humble stewardship. Perhaps a cautionary tale of hubris and unintended harm. But here's a secret few outside the planning chambers realize. The real lasting impact of the Calderdale debate might be the rise of a new generation of local experts, citizen scientists, campaigners, and everyday people who've learned to scrutinize environmental claims, challenge proposals, and help rewrite the playbook for projects yet to come. That grassroots expertise could become the region's greatest asset, outlasting any turbine and transforming the next energy debate before it even begins. So, what's the answer to our original question? Can renewable progress and fragile ecology coexist, or must one give way? If nothing else, Calderdale proves that the answer is never simple. With careful planning, honest science, and authentic dialogue, compromise is possible. But it's neither easy nor guaranteed. Every case, every landscape is unique. Success depends on transparency, vigilance, and a willingness to learn from both mistakes and triumphs. If you want to shape the future, whether it's supporting projects that are truly sustainable or holding decision makers to account, your voice matters. Stay informed, get involved, and above all, keep asking tough questions. If this story inspired you to look deeper into the balance of nature and innovation, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the world's pivotal decisions, and share your thoughts below. What's your vision for the landscapes of tomorrow? And remember, in the energy transition, the most powerful force